Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Sam, what were you saying about the verse of the Holy Quran where it says, our women, your women?
So yeah, the next day, the Christians, and of course Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they brought their two groups to meet for this Mubahila. And the Christians, it said they brought about from 40 to 60 people in their group, men, to meet the Prophet for this Mubahila. Now, like I mentioned before the break, here's the ultimate showing of position in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who does the Prophet bring with him? The Prophet brings with him, like I mentioned, 40 to 60 on the Christian side. The Prophet, including the Prophet, there were 5 people the Muslims brought. That was Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
Wow.
Imam Ali alayhi salam, Bibi Fatima salam alayha, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who were children at the time. So on the other side, 40 grown men, and on this side,
You have
the family of the Prophet.
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his daughter, his son-in-law, and his 2 grandchildren.
Exactly, yes. When the people saw this, of course this was a huge thing. Because, like I mentioned earlier, what the scholars, when they had
Set up his backup
the
plan.
Christians, yes, when the Christians had discussed it, they knew that if that's what the Prophet brought, if he brought some of his close blood relatives, then there was no way that they could win.
Yes.
They decided to call off the Mubahila, and they said that, well, we'll instead pay the fine. Because when they called off the Mubahila, the Prophet naturally assumed, the Prophet said, well, I guess, you guys come accept Islam. Because if they concede that they know that who the Prophet brought with him, that the Prophet was in fact going to win this argument, really, which is the foundation.
And the Mubahila, that, the Christians kind of accepted that if they prayed, that they would be wiped off the face of the earth, pretty much. So they understood that, okay, if they don't want them to give their curses upon the Christians.
Right. And of course also because of the, like you mentioned, about knowing the position that the Prophet had, because they conceded. They knew that they weren't going to win that. They didn't want to get the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So instead they conceded and they decided to pay the tax to not only save themselves from this situation, but to save the entire religion of Christianity from being destroyed.
And they definitely did. So they paid the tax, and what else happened there? After they paid the tax, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also said that if they did not pay that tax and they went through with Mubahila, that Christianity would have been wiped out, which would have had a huge effect, especially in today's world.
Yeah, I think it's just very, when you look at the situation itself, seeing that how the Christians decided to save the religion, really there is no argument, That's why it's seen as the event of Mubahila, Eid al-Mubahila, is seen as such a huge event, because it was a victory over the Christians.
Yeah, that's what I think makes it, so significant, this event of Mubahila, that it kind of further establishes Islam and, the Muslims' authority in not only the eyes of Muslims, but also other religions. Of course, in other religions, especially Christianity.
And the second aspect of this was about who the Prophet brought with him. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Quran, bring our children and your children, our women and your women, ourselves and yourselves. Who did the Prophet bring with him? The Prophet brought those closest to him, who were really representations. For example, Bibi Fatima is a representation for all women. Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam were the representations. They're known as the leaders of the youth of paradise. And they were just children at the time. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, now where does Imam Ali alayhi salam fit into this? And this really ties into the event of Ghadir, Eid al-Ghadir, which was
just last week,
7 days ago. In the way that Imam Ali alayhi salam was included in ourselves, included in the same way as an extension of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, it really just solidifies, Imam Ali alayhi salam and the whole Ahlul Bayt. Of course, Eid al-Ghadir, which was last week, where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Imam Ali alayhi salam as his successor. Where, of course, all the other prophets and imams also had their successors. This was also Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's successor. And that is pretty much Eid Mubahila. But also, if I were to ask you, how does this establish Islam in the eyes of other people?
Well, like we mentioned earlier, I think that really is the answer to the question, that the Christians conceded this. They conceded that they were wrong and that they did not want to go through with the Mubahila. And Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Jesus of course is the most widely known name, that Jesus was the Son of God. The Christians conceded on this. The Christians of Najran conceded, and they understood that they were not winning that argument. And that is a huge foundation of Christianity as we know it today.
Yes, of course. Just that they have like what, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But
Right. Some groups, yeah.
Yeah, some groups. But also that Islam, the counter argument that was provided, that Prophet Adam alayhi salam would have a greater right, because they said, of course, no child can have a father, right? Can't have a father. There has to be a father and a mother. So that's why, okay, that's where they get it from. Of course, his miracles and bringing people back from the dead and other such
many of the prophets of Allah
events.
subhanahu wa ta'ala have been gifted these incredible miracles. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, I think one of the best example, how he took his staff and parted the sea. I mean, all of these are incredible examples. It's not just, for example, because you're able to have these miracles that you're in fact the Son of God. I think that's one of the main representations you can see, especially because of this.
Yes, because they Prophet Adam alayhi salam would have a greater right as well. That's
Of course.
That's basically where this argument is predicated.
I think another aspect of it is not only who the Prophet brought with him, but even elevating the status of the Ahlul Bayt even more, in the way that there was only a few. For example, if the Prophet had brought, if there were 7 or 8 or 10 people of his close family members, compared to the Christians, who 40 to 60, it would still be a low amount. It would still be the family, right? That would still be something to look at as an important thing. But the fact that the Prophet brought with him 4 other people, including, like we mentioned, Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, children, he brought his daughter, and he brought his son-in-law. It elevates their position even more. And it really puts, paves the road, really, for their position in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how we look at the Ahlul Bayt ourselves. And even at how we look at this occasion, the event of Mubahila. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to see the position that the Ahlul Bayt had. And how, of course, there's the Quran. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam left for us the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, and both of these things are connected.
And that's what kind of helps us everyday Muslims to kind of guide both the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt.
Yes.
Thank you, Brother Salman, for joining on today's program.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who watched on the show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.